What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the third album by the rock band Trapt. Basically, this album is called Someone in Control, and it came out in the late summer of 2005. Now, originally, I thought that this was Trapt's second album, just because Trapt self-titled from 2002 was basically like their major label debut, but there was another album that came before that one, but this is like the follow-up to their breakout hit album from 2002, which was kind of a new metal smash, had the large hit single Headstrong on there, and it also had Still Frame. Now, I reviewed Trapt from 2002 way back in the summer of 2016, and it's been a while. I've owned this album for quite some time. I did buy that album way back in 2016, but I just never got around to reviewing it, and I wanted to finally review it now just to see what I thought about it, just because of how much new metal I listen to and how easy this album would be to review. The reception about this album is kind of different just because they were kind of seen as one-hit wonders a little bit, just because of Headstrong and to a smaller degree Still Frame. Those were like their two biggest songs. But this album does have some hits on here. I definitely feel like this is pretty much a new metal classic and a post-grunge classic. But I think critics just didn't care for this album too much, and they kind of got dropped from their label after the disappointing sales of this album. They had 3 singles that kind of did modestly, 2 of which this didn't chart. 2 of the singles out of 3 on here didn't really chart on any rock charts. But I feel like all the singles are good, and this is just a pretty executed one. Was a pretty solid follow-up. It just didn't have the massive. And the thing about it is there were certain new metal songs, like when you think of Limp Bizkit or Korn or Linkin Park or some of them that were kind of popular, like the breakout success of Headstrong was particularly large and revered, but it was kind of a difficult song to kind of sequelize and kind of make like a follow-up to it. Just kind of had that particular, like, new metal's a real tricky genre to kind of get more hit subjects. It's because you have to have like the right tempo. It's the same problem that Crazy Town kind of had, was folks wanted another Butterfly, but that was just kind of an awkward song to kind of get. You have to have the same tempo, the same kind of breakout. Just like Headstrong was just kind of a catchy chant that you could say and was recitable and that type of stuff, but Stand Up is not quite as recitable, and I think that kind of possibly contributed towards it. Just looking after it, just being able to say that it just didn't have like the ubiquitousness of like Headstrong. And Still Frame was another song that hit #1, but it didn't have like a follow-up single like that either. But it's not a bad album. It's not a bad album. I mess with this album quite a bit, and I do recommend purchasing it if you do like new metal and post grunge, some of that mid 2000s kind of post grunge kind of fanfare as far as that kind of goes. This is a good worthiness of that sort of concept. It has a lot of something I have to commend about this album is it has a lot of good instrumentals on here, a lot of good instrumentation. The band does excellent work on here. Chris Taylor Brown fits with these productions on here extremely well, and it just works as like a massive hit. Like, I remember back in 2016, I didn't like Trapt. I liked Trapt from 2002, but I don't think I gave it a 10 or even an 8 or a 9 out of 10. But I would have to say, if I were to go back and review that album, I'd probably like it more now, because I remember not liking Still Frame as much or the third single Echo. But I would definitely say I think I'd like those songs now, and I like the singles off this album, which was kind of a reason why it took me so long to review this project, is just because I liked Stand Up, but back in the day, like back in 2016, back in the day, I didn't like the other 2 singles as much. So I think I would have just given it a poor score. But it's going to get a rave score, and you'll see that as we go along. But so we'll go ahead and talk about the singles. So the first single is Stand Up, and this is one that came out in the summer of 2005. This is an exhilarating buzz single that gets the blood pumping real well. This is like a nice evening outing, I would say, and it's a nice evening outing activity bop, I would definitely say. It's just got a good kind of exhilarating energy. It's kind of like a mini pseudo sequel to Headstrong. It has that same kind of combative and kind of more fierce and kind of defensively kind of riveting kind of vibes about it as far as that kind of goes. I do like the concept about it. It's not quite as impactful as Headstrong, but it's in the same kind of veneer and context as that one. It's just not quite as, I mean, I think this song is great. I think it's an excellent song. Definitely is a catchy one in my sense. I definitely like the production value and just the overall kind of exhilarating kind of feel of it, but it just didn't quite connect as well with audiences as much. And that's kind of why they kind of fell off and got dropped from the label. But I don't think this song is bad. It's a pretty excellent one. It's very similar to Headstrong, I would have to say. And then the second single was Waiting, and this is kind of a bleary makeshift late day commerce of a song. Waiting is kind of some bleary makeshift late day commerce. It's kind of like a hazy sunset fair, I would say, and it's rather steadfast and vanilla for like a rock song. This is definitely another stock Trapt song, I would have to say. This one's just kind of pumped out, factory made for radio as far as that kind of goes. I was surprised at how steadfast this song kind of was. Where Still Frame was like a worthy follow-up single just because it kind of was like a summer bop, but this one is just very much in the makeshift kind of sense. This one just kind of feels like blue collar and just late day commerce, 4:30 p.m., 5 p.m., that type of stuff, as far as just winding down in that sort of sense. Not quite as wound down as like disconnected, but it's definitely one just for that malaise, just like the definitely one for just that malaise, like the pink and orange skies, as far as that kind of goes, especially in the summertime when you can have the windows down in your vehicle and that type of stuff, as far as just appreciating the sights, getting some food, getting some Burger King, some KFC, some of that type of stuff. It's just very vanilla and just kind of factory made. It's just kind of in that lazy sort of sense. It's a good kind of makeshift kind of song that I like. I do miss the kind of riveting and kind of dance. I do miss the kind of riveting and kind of night venue kind of energy of stand up, but this is just good to kind of have for like some standard factory makeshift kind of stuff as far as that kind of goes. So I like the concept. But Disconnected is the third single. Disconnected Out of Touch is the third single. This is another one that didn't chart that heavily, but this one's kind of wary, wind down, makeshift malaise, I would say. This one's a lot more wind down compared to Waiting, where Waiting just kind of felt like amidst like it being 4:35 p.m., or maybe you have some errands to run, some bills to pay, and that type of stuff. But this is definitely one that's just like you're going to be home in like 5 or 10 minutes, something like that. Just the concept of just completely winding down, taking your shoes off, that sort of feel. Just comfortable blue collar and just a very good kickback gem. So this is just one to kind of just go and get like, just go and get like a Dr. Pepper or something like that, just to kind of wind down kind of fare, as far as kind of the atmosphere of having some comfortable kind of blue collar as far as that kind of goes. But this one, like both Waiting and Disconnecting, that's kind of a, I don't want to say disappointing, but it's like somewhat kind of like a minor snag about this album. Not, I mean, this album's going to get a pretty rave score, but just to kind of say they needed kind of one with a little bit more bite. It's just surprising how kind of lambent this album kind of is in terms of the songs. It's surprising as to how lambent this album kind of is in terms of some of the songs that were released to radio and such. I think that's just kind of the concept about it. But both these, Waiting and Disconnected, are kind of wind down kind of music, just kind of just after hours, just got done with the activities and responsibilities type stuff, just getting like the simplest things, snacks, winding down, getting ready to go back to the crib and some of that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. But Stand Up does have some jivey kind of energy, and there are more songs like that on here. It's not one of the typical complaints where there's just only like wind down and makeshift kind of tunes, stuff like that. There's just definitely some good gems on here, plenty of stepping out moments, and within 11 songs, this album has the right sense of dislike. In terms of the 11 songs on this album, this has a good sense of just like nightlife, day life, and just overall, just like your loud pack for just summers and falls and that type of stuff. Just the makeshift kind of malaise of just loud pack as far as like daily living, as far as that kind of goes. Just a good loud pack to kind of have in your vehicle, and tape deck and some of that type of stuff, and MP3 player for a while. This really works extremely well. But to kind of talk about some of the songs on this album, so out of 11 songs on this album, the only song I don't recommend to you out of those is just Product of My Own Design. And to talk about that one's like the only true one that didn't have some sort of interesting instrumental on their instrumentation. That was the only one I didn't completely vibe with. Really, 10 out of 11 songs on this album I connected with wholesomely, and just felt like this was just a ravenous bite and just an exhilarating and kind of exuberant time that just kicked a lot of ass. So yeah, this album's going to get a 10 out of 10, but that's pretty much the only song I didn't connect with, was just Product of My Own Design. Just didn't quite have like it was just a little bit more bland than I would have wanted. But so to talk about some of these songs on the album, like one of the best instrumentations on this album is Victim. This is a very imperative sounding kind of bustle and traverse gem, I would say, and it's a good cut for late day commute or errand. So there's definitely some good ones on here that are good for like post grunge and alternative metal kind of haze. Like if you like songs like Waiting and Disconnected, Victim is a little bit more imperative sounding, but it's another good one for that sort of concept. There are some metal songs on here, but songs like Waiting, Disconnected, Victim, there's another one, Influence is like that, Bleed Like Me is like that. So there are kind of some post-grunge-esque kind of tunes on here that just work pretty well. And another one that's like that is Lost Realist. So yeah, there's a good assortment. This is actually a more kind of just like ruminating kind of album. That's kind of the thing about it. There are some jivey moments like Stand Up on here, but for the most part, this is a lot more just kind of alternative metal, post-grunge kind of malaise of just like day after hours kind of makeshift ruminating as far as that kind of goes, just with more thought-provoking kind of just angsty kind of feels. I mean, it keeps the angst on this album as just a little bit more kind of straightforward and steadfast about it, but I do like the concept. It just has a real compact and kind of affable kind of personality on this album. It's just interesting that it is makeshift, but it's not in like a unpersonable kind of way that's just not affable in that sort of concept. So that's good to get. But Lost Realist is kind of a more emotive and warm version of Disconnect. It's just healthy wind down blue collar music, I would say. It's just a healthy wind down blue collar kind of tune. It just works as far as that kind of goes. This, if you like Disconnected, it's the same kind of concept as Disconnected, that same kind of bleary kind of malaise kind of feel about it, but this one's just a little bit warmer and more emotive, I would have to say. But Lost Realist is another good one. Another song like that is Influence. This is kind of a contemplative, kind of post-grunge like ruminating song, and it has personality and kind of an ambient feel. So this is another good one. Though I do feel like Influence is kind of more of one that would be used to step out a little bit and kind of a little bit one of an exhilarating one. That kind of like the concept. Like Lost, Realist, and Disconnect are more kind of just going home and relaxing a little bit more. But I feel like songs like Victim is kind of like a Traverse kind of post grunge kind of song. Just kind of got some errands to do. But Influence is kind of one where maybe you're going to have a time for the night. Good song to pair up with Stand Up and Skin Deep and Repeat Offender and some of those. And then another ruminating cut on here that works real well. That's just like some of these more kind of sluggish ones that, surprisingly, Trapt does these down tempo kind of moments extremely well. So they have like this alternative metal. They have like this alternative metal stuff pretty well mastered, I'd have to say. I just liked all of these. These instrumentals just really were excellent. And I would have to say just the vibes that they're affable, just in the sense where they kind of, even when they're winding down, they have compelling energy. And Bleed Like Me is a ruminating cut. It's some late day haze, and it's got dreary vibes with like a jolting chorus, and it's just some good post grunge. I feel like Bleed Like Me is kind of like waiting and disconnected. This one's just a little bit more contemplative and a little bit more just kind of maybe like not so much going to have a better time like Influences, but it's just kind of another good one for just that routine of just smoking a swish or something like that and enjoying some times. Just kind of just more thought provoking in that sort of sense. But it does have a pretty jolting chorus. This is kind of like a mid, or it has post grunge kind of feels about it, but it has a pretty rockish kind of chorus, just rather jolting chorus as far as that kind of goes. But they talk about some of these riveting songs. Skin Deep is a jivey kind of evening activities warming up kind of tune. It's definitely got a nice riveting groove and it's very catchy. So this is kind of a nice one here. Definitely like the instrumentation on Skin Deep. This is just a good example of like an up-tempo song that, despite the fact that it's not like a full-blown head-banging kind of carnivorous one, it still has like some jivey energy that just feels good for like a night venue, something like that. It's just a good one. Repeat Offender is like stepping out evening gem. This is a nice thrilling week. This has some nice thrilling weekend vibes and it has lively appeal. It's another good one. Repeat Offender is a good one to pair up with Skin Deep and Stand Up. Definitely some of those ones were just a more jivey and kind of lively kind of time for like some weekend senses as far as that kind of goes. It's a good jolt of like some evening kind of energy. Definitely a good one. I mean, maybe the only thing about Trapt I would have to say is they just don't have like the full blown party craze kind of energy, but they definitely have some ones to kind of get you excited. I would say they may not be full amongst, like Headstrong was kind of more full blown amongst it, or at least preparing to be amongst it, but they don't really have a song that's like full blown carnivorous crazy, but they do have some ones that kind of get you excited. So I like that concept. And then Use Me to Use You is another. And Use Me to Use You is a good out on the town rocker. This is definitely one for being out and about and just having a good time throughout the city as far as that kind of goes. It has nice riffs on there and a catchy energy. It's just a very boppish track, I would have to say. It's just an overall catchy one that works real well. So yeah, that's kind of the concept about this album. I give this album a 10 out of 10 because I give this album 10 out of 10 because I like 10 out of 11 songs on here, which is really outstanding. Just would have to say I really connected with this album quite a bit. This was an exhilarating, pulsating kind of time that just worked extremely well. In terms of social score, I'm going to give this album like a 10 out of 10 because I loved how this album juggled like these more blue collar and straightforward kind of steadfast moments along with like some jivey kind of nightlife and evening fare as far as that kind of went. It was just a very good execution of how that kind of happened, and there's just some real good. There are some ones that kind of have like a riveting kind of feel and get you jolted and energized as far as that kind of goes, even if it doesn't have like a crazy kind of stand on the couches kind of rocker as far as that kind of goes. But that's minor complaints. That's water underneath the bridge. So I just would have to say 10 social. In terms of the future, like Trapt has dropped albums recently. I know they at least have dropped an album in 2020 and possibly 2023. Wikipedia doesn't really write articles about them as much anymore. But I would have to say this is pretty excellent. I'm going to have to review some more Trapt because this was a surprising kind of jolt of energy that I just forgot about. I'm going to have to return to Trapt because this is a surprising jolt of energy that I did forget about.